Hello, everyone. This is Robert Birch. I am the president of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society Utah chapter. And so we want to take a little time today to introduce you to two of our great chapter members. On the right here you have Miss Deborah Robinson. She's one of our professional genealogists in our chapter, and also former president of the New York chapter of AAHGS. Okay, so we stole her from them anyway. And on the left is Miss Crystal Farish. She is also a professional genealogist, and she is our chapter genealogist. She is our person that works in our chapter to organize events surrounding family history and genealogy research. And so I want to take this time that they get to introduce themselves to you and talk to each other so that you can get to know them.
Okay, well, it's fun to be here with Deborah. So, Deborah, tell us, Robert mentioned that you were the former president of the New York chapter. Mm-hmm. So tell us your story of how you ended up in Utah.
Oh my goodness. So yes, I'm from New York City, the Bronx, and I was an owner of my own business. I was a genealogist in the Bronx, and I was studying to get my board certification. As Robert mentioned, I was the chapter president for the New York AAHGS, Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. And I got a call, actually not a call, but I was contacted by LinkedIn by Ancestry, their pro-genealogist division, and they asked that I come out, and the rest is history. That's how I wound up here. I took the job, and I moved from the Bronx to Utah.
And how did you get started in genealogy?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I started like most people, curious about my family history back in the late 80s and early 90s. Well, first of all, I grew up with a mom who was from the South. And she would always talk about where she came from, a little island in South Carolina off the southeastern coast, on the southeastern coast, called Edisto Island, which is in Charleston County. And the culture is Gullah Geechee, meaning we are one of the few subcultures within the African community who have retained a lot of our African, who have a lot of African retention through the fact that we as a people who were enslaved in that region of the country, we were brought over because of a particular set of skills, rice growing skills. And so the slaveholders took captives from the western coast of Africa, all those countries that we now know as Nigeria and Burkina Faso and Benin, Togo, Ghana. That particular region was known for their rice growing skills. And so the people were brought over from those areas into the Sea Islands of South Carolina, beginning in southern North Carolina, all the way down through Florida. So there's a 12,000 mile coast along the coast of South Carolina, or the United States, known as the Gullah Geechee Corridor.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, and so my family is from Edisto Island, which is just north of Beaufort in South Carolina, and it is, as I said, in Charleston County. And so to get back to your question though, I grew up listening to my mom talk about Edisto and growing up there, and the land that our family still retains there. And I began to get curious about this land in particular. And so I ventured down one summer and began researching and was pretty successful in finding out the origins of some of the land that is still retained in my family that was acquired immediately after emancipation.
Oh, wow.
And so we still have property there. I have cousins who live on a portion. I have some of the land. And so it has just been a labor of love ever since.
That's pretty cool. And just to have a history like that's like rooted deep in that town that you still have a presence there.
We do, absolutely. I have lots of family who still lives there and all throughout the state of South Carolina.
So is that like an area that you specialize in then, is South Carolina, or?
Yes, I specialize in the southeastern region of the United States. So it's South Carolina, it's Florida, Alabama, Mississippi,
Okay.
North
Oh,
Carolina.
cool.
Yes.
That's really neat.
Yes. And so that's my story. How about you? I know that you are at Ancestry, and what do you do there?
So I work at Ancestry. I'm a professional genealogist for them, and I specialize in lineage society research.
Okay.
And one of the things that we've talked about was Sons and Daughters of the Middle Passage, the Lineage Society,
Yes.
that honors the enslaved African Americans. So I'm really interested in helping people document their history so that they can join that society. I think it's a really important society to help preserve the stories of the people who helped build the United States.
Absolutely.
And a great resource tank for others who are wanting to learn about their family history, that it'll have that stamp of approval, and there's a database that's being built as part of that I think is really significant. So I just want to help people get into that. So, and my love for that started with the movie Roots.
Okay.
My cousin was one of the producers of that movie. And so as it was being filmed, we talked a lot about it in our family, and heard about what was going on. And my dad had died just a few years before, and he didn't really leave any stories. So after I saw that, it had a huge impact on me, and I thought, wow, it's amazing that he knew about all of these generations of his ancestors, and I wonder if I could find that. And so it led me down to the Family History Library in Salt Lake, and the first day I found this amazing story about one of my ancestors who lived in Virginia and lived through the Civil War and the War of 1812, and I was hooked from then on. So
What's your background? Are you from Salt Lake?
I grew up in Salt Lake, but my great-great-grandfather was from Virginia.
Okay.
My great-grandfather was from Virginia and ended up coming out here as a youth. So
That's on your paternal line.
Yeah, it's my paternal line, but they all lived back there for many generations, like 8 generations.
Okay.
They settled in Charlottesville, Virginia, and had some really interesting stories there.
And so are you first generation Salt Lake, or?
I
second?
am third
Okay.
generation Salt Lake.
All
So my great-grandfather came here, then my grandfather, my dad, and then me.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been here quite a while. So interesting history on my mother's side of the family, that they were like early pioneers here too.
Okay.
So, but I'm more interested in my Virginia side of the family, and that.
The paternal line.
Yeah, and was disheartened because here I'd watched this movie Roots, and then found out that my ancestors were very large slave owners. But that really helped me. It led me to what I'm passionate about now, because I thought I want to make sure that their stories are told, that the slaves' stories are told, because he was known as being this person who built the town of Charlottesville, but he really didn't. He financed that the slaves built that town.
Okay,
And
so telling the enslaved people's history, and yes. And
yeah.
So have you come across in your research documentation that lists or talks about any of the enslaved people?
Yes, which was fascinating to me. So when I looked in some of the deed books, I was trying to document my family history for board certification here. And so I looked, and the first deed I found was a deed relinquishing some family slaves from one brother to another.
Okay.
And then I found like 3 full pages in the deed books for this ancestor. And so right now I'm in the process of going through and reading all those deeds, because most of them are slave transactions and they have names. And so I'm trying to extract all of those names out and then putting those into what's that?
Beyond kin? Or slaves no longer?
Slaves no longer.
Okay.
And adding that to the database, and then just creating a Charlottesville deed books. You know, like here's the names of the enslaved that are in this deed book.
So just to explain real quickly, what we're talking about are a couple of sites on the web where people who have slaveholding ancestors and find these documentation, they can take this documentation, put them on these sites so that others who are looking for their enslaved ancestors can go and access the information to help them with their research, which is wonderful, I think. I'm really a big fan of Slaves No Longer and Beyond Kin, so that's great.
And really, in my work at Ancestry, in some of the projects that I've worked there, I've used those sites, and it was like thrilling what I was able to find there, because it helped me solve and identify the client's her enslaved ancestors. So I thought that it would be really great to be able to contribute some stuff to that side.
And what's also good, you mentioned the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage Lineage Society, but you also are heavily involved in other lineage societies like the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, and
Mayflower Society. So, and there are like lots of African Americans who have ancestors who served. So it is really exciting to be able to help someone get into those societies as well.
Absolutely, yeah. People don't realize there were dozens of, or not dozens, but a couple of 100,000 people of African descent who served in those wars, in the American Revolution and Spanish-American War, and all of those other wars.
Yeah, and there's a society for most of them.
Yes.
Civil War, War of 1812, so if they fought in any of those, you can, or if you're an early settler in a town or a region, sometimes there's societies for that too. So it's worth checking out.
Right here in Utah.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of putting a marker on the grave of Hark Lay Wales, who was one of the early pioneers right here in Utah, who helped bring the settlers in and pave the way and helped build the town.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he was one of 3, and whose name is mentioned on the memorial, talking about the first pioneers.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
And so he is buried in the Union Pioneer Cemetery, and so we're trying to develop funds to put down a headstone for him.
Well, that's great. So we'll shout out to that, because if anybody wants to help contribute, that would be awesome.
Wonderful, absolutely. So it's great speaking with you.
It's great to talk to you.
To doing more with you for the chapter.
Yeah,
And
I'm really excited.
Come out. Take advantage of what we have to offer.
Thanks a lot.